Well, hello, everyone. Happy Tuesday. Welcome to the scheduled stream for today, not to be confused with the impromptu stream that I did a little bit earlier that I definitely recommend you check out if you have not already in my ongoing war with fake journalist Katie Herzog. You know, I emailed Katie earlier today and I said, given the fact that in the first two pieces that I've released, I've been able to completely and thoroughly debunk your claims, would you like to retract this or would you like to keep going? So I'm happy to debunk literally everything you said, but I think you now know that I'm not fucking around. And so I'm giving you the opportunity to retract. I gave her 24 hours to answer me, so we will see if she does. I promise you, if she does not retract the fucking thing, I'm going to be releasing some more because I don't like it when people lie about me and my marriage on the internet. I think that's kind of, legit if I'm being honest about it. But we're not going to talk about that right now. We have another subject matter to talk about today. And before I bring on my wonderful and talented guest, I just want to make sure that you guys know a couple announcements coming up. First off, I do have an event that I'm doing with Miss Gabrielle Clark coming up next week. Can you believe it's August already? We are going to be doing a private webinar for parents for kids in schools that maybe have been socially transitioned without telling the parents. And Gabrielle is going to talk about her experience with this and how she helped her daughter to deprogram her from the gender cult. The event is the first part is on August 2nd. The second part is on August 4th. We're doing them in the evenings at 8 p.m. Eastern time. And so I definitely encourage anyone who has kids in school, are going to want to come to this event. It's going to help you out a lot. You can find out more about that at activelyunwoke.com/events. If you just go to this Unwoke events link right up at the top, that's going to bring you to the place where you register and you can learn more about the event and the different types of programming we're going to do there. And if you could share it out to anyone you know that might be interested, that would really help us out as well. Another thing I want to let you know is that I actually have another stream today. This is a 3-stream kind of day because, of course, it is Tuesday. And so I will be going live with Joshua for Nothing Remotely Controversial at 9:30 p.m. tonight. I'm not exactly sure why the stream isn't showing up on the homepage of my channel just now. I will look into that later. But the stream is going live tonight, so you guys can look forward to that. And then tomorrow, I've got the amazing Jennifer coming on. We had to reschedule this stream for my Dis and Rage series when I got my stupid strike last week, but we are resuming it. And tomorrow at 5 p.m., we're going to have a chat with Jennifer about what it's like to grow up in a Christian cult. I think that's going to be a great chat, and I'm really looking forward to it. One final thing, if you would like to support the work I'm doing and keep me in business and keep us streaming and having these awesome conversations, just like we're going to have today with my awesome, amazing, I'm using the word awesome way too much, amazing guest, what you're going to want to do is become a member in my Locals community. Locals is the best place on the internet. We do 2 Zoom calls every single week that are private, that are unrecorded, where we can talk about whatever we want. And we talk about so many subjects. It's a little ridiculous. There are also extra perks that you get as being part of my Locals community. If you'd like to take advantage of that, please head over to kb.locals.com/support and sign up for $5 a month or more if you want to, but you don't have to. You can also sign up for $50 a year, and that gives you 2 months for free, or you can make a one-time gift. And my local supporters help keep me in business. They help keep the channel running, and I greatly, greatly, greatly appreciate their support. All right. Let's get into the matter at hand. My guest today is Mr. Dave Benner. He is the Region 2 rep to the Libertarian National Committee, a member of the National LP Communications Committee, a contributor to the 10th Amendment Center and the Mises Institute, and the author of several works, including the forthcoming Thomas Paine, A Lifetime of Radicalism. I've got his contact information in the description below. And what we're going to talk about today is he is one of, though not only, but one of the masterminds behind the Libertarian Party national Twitter account. Dave, welcome to the stream.
Thanks, Carlin, for having me. This is awesome. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm so looking forward to this because, as you know, like the Reno Reset was an amazing moment for everyone to be able to do some good, strong libertarian messaging. And, the Twitter account was really one of the places where people had, let's just say, like a little consternation about the messaging. So did you feel any pressure in being like one of the main guys taking over the Twitter account?
Yeah, a little bit. And I was actually surprised in how I was alerted to it. I actually got a text from someone. I didn't see this posted on the business list that it would be me partially helping to run it. But I had just told Angela, I'm interested in Twitter. She knew that I ran the LPTN Twitter with the help of a buddy of mine from LPTN. That's great. and just was pretty surprised when I got a text that said, "Hey, you and Dave Smith are running the national Twitter." I couldn't believe it. I thought there was a joke at one point, and I looked, and hey, there I am. So I did feel pressure. I still feel pressure all the time, just to make sure that we have the most radical and best far-reaching libertarian takes on everything.
No, I mean, I think you guys are doing a great job, and I can't imagine. I would have felt like, I use Twitter on my personal account rather irresponsibly, and I admit to that. But I can't imagine, like, you are in a position where you're representing the National Libertarian Party, and it's a difficult thing, right? Because you have to kind of balance being appropriate for a political party, but also being edgy and doing things in a way that are really getting people's attention. And can you talk to me a little bit about kind of the philosophy that you're using to kind of formulate your tweets?
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't take it lightly. Every tweet is thought out ahead of time, believe it or not, even a lot of the responses. But here's my general philosophy is that we should reach people, and especially the indisposed. Reaching the indisposed people is the key demographic I think we need to attract. But not only them, it's libertarians that are small L libertarians that have been on the sidelines for a while and just haven't really trusted the party. Those should be our low hanging fruit. So to go after hardcore libertarians and the politically dispossessed, because we hear so much about, triangulating to the right and the left, but so many people's lives were ruined over the last 2 years, especially, that a lot of people don't know where to go. They're kind of political nomads, so to speak. So I wanted to make the account more irreverent, more radical, and also focus a lot more on reply tweets. Now, replies were not something that this account did that much before. There were some replies, but we really make that a major focus. And the fourth thing is to network and do what I call high five tweets, to kind of cross collaborate with other libertarians in the Twitter sphere that haven't been generally associated with the party before, just kind of building bridges. And I think we've really done that well with like the crypto community and Bitcoin community. I know that Bitcoin maximalists will say not crypto, Bitcoin. So we're really focusing on that. And we're also focusing on, people like Zuby has followed the account in the last month. So
Good.
we're really just trying to build bridges, attract the most people possible, say daring things, and having the courage to boldly speak the truth, even in controversial territory.
Now, the Reno reset was obviously not without controversy, and there continues to be whining and complaining and commiserating from the people who didn't get their way out of that. But I think that there's been a lot of opportunity there too, in terms of what I've seen. And obviously, I haven't been involved in the Libertarian Party as long as really anyone. It's only been about a year, but there it almost seemed to have life breathed into it after during like as soon as like the Reno reset was done. Like everyone just seemed like excited again, and you started seeing these people saying, oh my god, I can finally start looking at LP National and paying attention to what they're doing. So what has, from your perspective, been kind of like the balance between people who are upset with what the Twitter account's doing versus people who are really excited about what the Twitter account's doing?
There's a lot of both. You get a lot of feedback, and it'd be hard for me to just, by the sample size I see on Twitter, go through and, in my mind say, there's so much more antagonism than there is praise. I see mostly praise, but again, this is based on my sample size. But I in some ways it's, I had a lot of complaints about the messaging before too, and there's no possible person where you'll look at their account and they're spewing, radical political theory or radical political ideas and say that you love every tweet. That just doesn't happen. I don't love all of what my brother or my parents do. So, I just have to do the best I can. I do think that we have gotten a lot more people on the sidelines that have, maybe thought about the party, thought about joining in the past, and not quite doing it, pull the trigger. I've seen people posting about it, posting their membership cards, things like that. So I'm excited about what's to come, and the metrics are certainly reflecting a lot more high-spirited interactions and follows and things like that.
Cool. And I definitely want to talk about those metrics and some more about the reply tweets in a second. But do you read the replies to the Twitter account?
Sometimes I do, and it's just kind of like a guilty pleasure because I just
Right.
derive some enjoyment out of it. Maybe you do too.
Every once in a while, I might peruse.
Anyone that
I have to do it in a separate in a private browser just to get through all the people that I've been blocked by.
Yeah, and that's not why we tweet. We really want to set the world free and get our message out there, but inevitably you're gonna come across a lot of tweets that, are very kind of heckling and antagonistic, and some of it's really funny. I'm so desensitized to it now. Like I've literally seen everything said about the party, everything said about me on Twitter, so I just kind of chuckle about it now. But I do.
It's kind of funny that when you run an account that has like that many followers and you do get a lot of interaction is what I have found with because I never expected my Twitter account to grow as big as it is, and you start to see a pattern in the hate, don't you? They say the same things over and over and over and over again. I mean, they might use different words, but they're following the same general themes. And so after a while, you get to be able to identify, okay, this is not someone I should be paying attention to, whatever. Like, and you just do you see kind of like the same pattern when you're looking at the replies?
Oh, totally. What's the funniest to me is when we do just like an overt anti-law enforcement tweet and we say we're just parroting the right wing, and I don't get that. There's no right wingers I know that, are really devout about, defunding the police, getting them, ending qualified immunity, stopping no-knock raids, literally
Mhm.
disassembling and dismantling police forces, but we get that all the time. Age of consent, people just talk about age of consent as if that's like, a monolithic view that libertarians don't believe in any kind of age of consent, which is just totally
Yeah.
nonsense. I know a lot of libertarians throughout the country. I don't think I know anyone that doesn't believe in some form of age of consent, whether the state imposes it or what's the magic number. That's another thing. So we get those two a lot. But no, I do see some of the same things repeated, that we don't care about candidates, even though we're constantly retweeting candidates, talking about our
Mhm.
candidates, etc.
Yeah, I mean, well, and you can thank Jeremy, I think, for the age of consent nonsense. So, but no, I mean, you guys retweeted Jeremy's "War is Gay" ad the other day,
We
which is
did,
pretty
and
amazing.
it's a creative way to attack the military industrial complex. I think some people have interpreted that video much differently than it was intended. I think that it just shows the lengths at which the evil state is willing to go to just co-opt something that people generally see as a good thing, or how could you be against it, and just build it into bombing the oblivion out of people or shelling their property, destroying their lives. I mean, it's crazy. So I think it's clever. I like the ad. We're supporting Jeremy. He's a great creative candidate. And this candidacy, I got to tell you, is probably the most creative libertarian campaign I've ever seen, whether you like or don't like it. He's moving some way. He's making some waves up in New Hampshire. So,
Well, and I
as you
think
know.
well, yeah, and what I love about Jeremy's campaign is that I think it's making waves in more than just New Hampshire. I mean, those ads are getting hundreds of thousands of views nationally, and that's going to impact the way that people see the party. And maybe some people who thought that they were one thing might look at that ad and say, "Oh, what is going on here?" At least it's something interesting that sticks out, and I think it's really hard to stick out in a positive, like creative way when you're a political candidate.
Oh, totally. There's so many milk toast campaign ads, and that one just, it just blows your mind about the angles at which he approaches it and reveals like the pure evil that is, bombing innocents for no good reason at all. So
Mhm.
I totally agree. People like Jeremy are few and far between, and I'd love to see more creativity in campaign ads. And yeah.
Well, he set the bar, that's for sure. Well, I want to talk about your strategy in terms of going into the replies. So, what was the account doing before you guys took it over, and what is it doing now?
Yeah, so I don't, and I don't, I'm not here to relitigate the past, but there were times
Mhm.
in the past the former managers would not tweet more than once every few days. I look back at the account several times in the last years, and I've been associated with the party for a while where, there'd be 2 to 3 days where there's just no tweeting. And I know that's not all the time, but then there are a lot of times where, there are very few replies as well. So, sometimes I did see replies, they weren't unheard of or unfathomable, but I think we do an average of 6 to 8 replies a day. and we tweet 2 to 3 times a day on primary tweets, and then we retweet 2 to 3 affiliates / candidates per day. So not only did we want to just use this account more, we also wanted to make it more principled, radical principlism. We want to get to the heart of our platform in clever ways. And I don't feel like, some of the past managers were doing it to the best of their ability. But a lot of it wasn't necessarily what was done. It's really what wasn't done. There was a few tweets that I didn't like and things like that, but the account just really wasn't being utilized to the extent it could be, and it is now in my mind. And I'm biased. I'm helping to run it, but Dave Smith is helping me. I want to make that clear too, is that Dave Smith's been a big help on the account too.
Excellent. Tell Dave Smith to return my emails, will you? Please.
Yeah.
Please.
Well, next time I talk to him, I'll be happy to do that.
Thank you. I tell him I'm not as scary as I seem on Twitter. I promise. But I also have a question because Dan Smots, your ears must have been ringing because we were talking about you before we went live. When is Michael Malice gonna take the keys to the account?
I think he may already be campaigning for it. I don't know. I'm not really privy to those discussions. All I can do is do the best job I can while appointed here. If I'm taken off it for some reason, I won't feel, like I'm being slighted or anything like that. Malice is a genius. I think he's brilliant. He's great at Twitter. He might do a bang up job. And I think that dream isn't dead, but I don't know. All I'm doing is doing what I can for now.
Well, Dan says that's a politician answer there, but that's all right.
Maybe I should run.
Well, I think listen, man, if I can run for governor, anyone can run for governor. So like, here's what I think you guys should do. Like, that like robber image that Malice tweets every now and again. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Can you guys just retweet someone with that just like every once in a while, just to make it seem like Malice is behind the account, even though like we all know that he's not. It's like every once in a while. I've
seen replies that already say that they think that this is a Malice reply, but it's just because, I'm influenced by the greats that sow the seeds of our message so well, the Dave Smiths and Spike Cohens and Michael Malice and Harry Brown and Ron Paul. I'm influenced by all these people, Rothbard. There's a lot of that in, I guess, my replies, but no promises on that, but maybe I'll think about it.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. So what accounts are you replying to? Who are, like, you're a reply guy for who?
Oh man, the biggest is Biden. The biggest is both of Biden's accounts and Kamala Harris's account. Mitch McConnell, his Twitter game sucks, but we try to fry him sometimes. The Democrats and Republicans accounts, we go after them a lot. We've also replied a lot to like Glenn Greenwald, Jimmy Dore, some of like kind of the red-pilled left is, some targets that I think are super important to engage with, because no one could be better on like civil liberties and the wars as some of those guys. So we've been doing that a lot. Some of the crypto guys, we will reply a lot to AOC because her Twitter gets a lot of reach. So we're looking for accounts with a lot of reach where we can drop kind of libertarian truth bombs and just try to destroy the original post, but do it in a way that connects with regular people. We want, libertarian populism to take center stage, to make it be anti-elite, because what could be more anti-elite than the libertarian message of being anti-Fed, anti-war, etc. Some people think that's a dirty word, but all it really is you're for the common people against the power of the state that ruins their lives.
Now, I keep hearing that the Mises Caucus is just full of, MAGA and Trump people and, alt-right white supremacists and things like that. But it just sounded to me like you're going after both the right and the left.
Absolutely.
Right?
And if you look at our primary tweets, I think that we've been much more hostile to Republicans than Democrats in general, because they've betrayed our rights in so many ways, like the gun issue. There's that gun bill that came through where you saw, I think it was like 12 Republicans basically voted for additional firearm regulations recently. One of our biggest tweets actually was like, retweet this if you saw the Republicans would sell your rights down the water again in closed door negotiations, something like that. That's one of our biggest tweets. So yeah, we're going after both. I mean, the left is in power right now, so Biden's an easier target when it comes to that. But let's just be real. Republicans are not tweeting, anti-Yemen stuff, anti-war stuff, anti-Fed stuff. You cannot get those people to focus on that stuff. Even if they have, problems with it, you just won't see it out of the mainstream Republicans. Massey's different, but they're few and far between.
I think there's such an opportunity to win over Republican voters, because I think there's an opportunity to win over like red-pilled lefties as well. I think there's opportunity in both camps. I mean, obviously I come from the left originally, even though people think I come from the right for some weird reason. But I think there's a lot of opportunity with Republican voters, because a lot of them think they're libertarians. And I think that many of them are. I think a lot of the people that followed Trump in the MAGA movement in 2020, but didn't necessarily consider themselves like a Republican or conservative, definitely align more with the libertarians than they do with the Republicans. They just have a really bad taste in their mouth about the libertarians, because they all remember that Black Lives Matter tweet that I think will be forever living down, at least until the next election cycle, when someone else tweets something stupid. So I do think for me, I like that's a natural place to go to. Have you seen a positive response from that?
Yeah, to some extent. I think that, a lot of the disaffected Trump fans, at least they know something is freaking wrong, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of these people, they might be protectionists, they might be like what we would consider like cop worshipers, very pro-nationalist people. But I think a lot of the Trump fans, and you saw it in, the protests about the election, is that they know something's wrong. They know this American framework and system is not working the way it was designed. And, it's being led by corporatists and cronies and people that are corrupt. So, yeah, I do think that we're seeing a little bit of kind of cross connection from them, but I think we're also seeing it from, red pill lefties. I think that almost no one's better than people like, Noam Chomsky on war.
Oh, yeah.
The people he's influenced is, so important to engage with as well. And there's actually more crossover between those two groups, the red pilled groups in both categories, than people think.
Yes, there
so
really
not
are.
always in economics. I think economics is the biggest thing that separates it, but we believe in single issue coalitions. So
No, I mean, I think there's a ton of overlap in those groups, and I think I also think there's opportunities with people with trying to wake people up to like what the media is doing with the bias and the hypocrisy and stuff like that. I mean, a couple incidents come to mind. Is that like right after January? Was it after? Yeah, it was after January 6th, when all of the tech censorship like really started clamping down, and they were doing these mass purges. I remember that I was getting DMs from people that were still Democrats, like people that I knew before I kind of left the Democratic Party, saying, Carlin, I'm not like a Republican, but this censorship stuff is really freaking me out. And I know, like, I'm a child that I feel like I had my formative years in the 90s, and was very concerned about free speech issues. And so, it makes total sense to me that they would understand that, like, this, what the slippery slope of the First Amendment is, and understand that they don't know exactly what's going on, but they know that it's bad. And I feel like I've seen the same thing on the right. I've really been trying to, when I toured with like the Walkaway campaign in 2020, they were also doing like this Back the Blue stuff. And I was never like totally into it, but I would kind of like half-heartedly do like Back the Blue back, because I was like representing them. So I felt like I had to participate. But I feel like it was right after the election, there was a Million MAGA march in DC, and I went to that. And that night, the police were actually sending the Trump supporters through Black Lives Matter Plaza to get the crap beat out of them. And that was, I think, kind of like almost like a different type of red pill moment for some of those people. They're like, the police aren't going to protect me. And then after January 6th, when they saw like the Capitol Police were absolutely not going to do anything about what was going on, that was another moment for them where I feel like a lot of MAGA people really were like looking at the police being like, you're not going to help us? Like, what's going on? And so I feel like both sides are having like these moments with what's going on, that are opportunities for the libertarians. Am I on to anything there?
yeah, I think, and Malice talks about this a lot. He thinks that a lot of, right wingers have been red pilled against law enforcement in recent times because of some of the things you bring up, and also because, they realize that, the left stopped talking about defunding the police after it came to gun control. That you'd never heard that line after, gun control became the major issue, because obviously law enforcement would have to confiscate guns. So, yeah, I think you're onto something. I have to say, like, the run of the mill conservatives I know aren't haven't really changed much, but maybe some of the populist right has. So I think there's probably a mixture there.
I think for me, like what I learned when I was really kind of immersed in that culture is there's kind of like three different groups. There's the conservatives, there's the Republicans, who usually the conservatives hate and will call rhinos, and then you have like the MAGA populist movement, and they don't really like either like the Republicans, or I mean they tend to actually get along better with the conservatives than they do like the like rhino Republicans.
Mm.
But I do think it really is more of a populist movement. And I even made this argument, I think, like right after the 2020 election, that I thought that the MAGA people had much more in common with like your average Black Lives Matter activist, not the organizers, but like just the average activist, than they did with the rhinos or the people running the party. And that's where I think the opportunity is.
Oh, totally agree. I totally agree with that for, every reason you said. A lot of it is kind of, realizing something is wrong, and it comes from power holders to people that don't have power, whether it's seizing your wealth, police brutality, waging wars without your consent. All these things can unite a lot of people against the state. It's just a matter of channeling the message in the right way to try to engage them. If not in totality, because let's face it, we won't engage everyone in libertarianism in day two, but we can on those single issues. Like if Spike Cohen was good on this, because he always went to the Black Lives Matter crowds, and he wasn't like rah, 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 Black Lives Matter. He was like end qualified immunity. We can rally around that. Let's not leave everything else. Let's not leave all possible gains on the table just because we disagree on some things. And that's a big focus of this LNC and this Mises Caucus, is organizing, right to try nullification, firearm nullification, things that would nullify, legal tender, things like that. So that's a really important impetus for where we want to go as a party.
Cool. Well, going off of that, what are some of your kind of key messaging points, and how do you find the different messages kind of play on Twitter right now?
Yeah, so both me and Dave Smith are both aligned in general on this, that anti-Fed, anti-war is our bread and butter. So things that are like very much radical anti-Fed and for sound money, against the central bankers and against the destruction and debasement of our money, especially in this inflation crisis, and
Mhm.
also just indiscriminate bombing campaigns. Those are our bread and butter. That's what we'll always go back to. Almost every day, you'll see something on our Twitter account, at least, that tackles one of those two subjects. We just quoted a Thomas Paine quote right now about the dangers of war and those who, live their lives profiting from war. He wrote that over 200 years ago. So those are our bread and butter. For me, my baby is radical political decentralization, especially when it manifests into nullification, which was the idea Thomas Jefferson said was the rightful remedy against federal encroachments, and secession.
Mm.
National divorce is really my baby. That's something that I've very much been interested in, because it's a key part of our platform that's just been so disregarded. And it really has been part of the libertarian platform for a long time. Now, it was taken out in 2006 in what was called the Portland Massacre. I won't, go back into the past and everything that happened there, but we reinserted overt language pointing to secession in this recent convention, even though it kind of implied that, all free people had the right to alter or abolish their government. We want to make clear we want that done in a peaceful way through compacts, voluntary compacts amongst states. And it doesn't absolve or provide the remedy to all evils, because, of course, as we've seen during the lockdowns, the states and localities are evil too. But at least in that way, it gives you more of a chance to vote with your feet, move to where you want with distinctive policies that you align with, and also wield more influence on your legislators. I know that you guys in the free state have a lot of influence on, the free state leaning legislators that have passed some really incredible things, especially that permitless carry this year, right? So
Yeah. No, it's really great, and we actually had the first ever vote on state secession since the Civil War this year, and I've been deeply proud of that.
it's just so fantastic. And I know that a lot of that messaging is very controversial right now. That doesn't escape me, and I think some of it is in good faith. But what I would ask those people in kindness, I would ask them, well, if you're a libertarian and you think secession is morally permissible, what if not now than when. I mean, this is the largest government in the history of the world. It wields more power than George III's ever did. It confiscates half of people's wealth. It's destroyed your currency. It's locked you inside your house. Some people had to wait for their governors to tell them whether they could leave that day. It's set up a surveillance apparatus that, seeks out and captures all information about you. The evils that the central state has gone to cannot be adopted immediately by the localities. They just can't. And I know that local governments suck, but they don't have as much power as the feds do over your life.
Did you see this is kind of a little side note, but since we're on the topic, did you see the poll that came out in New Hampshire about secession last week?
No.
Okay, so check this out. You're going to love this. They polled on who supports secession in the state. Over 50% of Republicans support secession. And I think it was like 38% overall support secession. 1/3 of voters in New Hampshire now support secession. And I think that's, absolutely like indicative of the work the Free State Project has done, people like Lou Axelman have done, and the Liberty Bloc and things like that. And even, one of the things that's really great about New Hampshire is that even though I have my problems with the GOP, the New Hampshire GOP is pretty libertarian because they've been forced to be pretty libertarian. So I think those poll numbers were much higher than anyone thought they would be.
I mean, that's so awesome. And, that's one of the common quips against like the national divorce and secession messaging is this is so utterly unpopular and it'll never work. Well, I've seen several studies, including one by Brightline Watch, that shows that if you had to guess what was more popular between ending the Fed and secession, the average person might say end the Fed, but no, it's actually secession. If you had someone that said, what's more popular between ending the Department of Education or ending or secession, I think the latter might win out, at least according to some of these numbers nationwide that I've seen from the studies that I've looked at. So, it's more and more popular all the time. The unfortunate thing that I see is when a Republican's in power of Congress and the presidency, only left-wingers are mostly talking about it. You saw a lot of the Cal exit stuff during that time. And when left-wingers control the Congress and presidency, mostly only right-wingers talk about that. And that's unfortunate because we believe in consistent political decentralization, and we need to push that.
And it is. I hadn't actually thought about it until you said it, but that's true. That like it's always only the opposing party who is complaining about the fact that we're still in the union when someone that they don't like is in charge, and that is honestly one of the things that just drives me crazy about politics in general. I feel like there's just no one principled, and that's one of the reasons I think gravitated to the libertarians, because love them or hate them, the libertarians are consistent.
Absolutely. I mean, we should be the party that are watching, the party of stupid and evil squabble together and look down from above saying, no, this is unprincipled craziness that wouldn't fly in a free society. We should have the same moral standards regardless of who's in power, regardless of the legislative composition, and regardless of, cultural dynamics. So agreed.
Yeah, definitely. Well, you brought up the Department of Education, and you know that the schools are one of my big issues. Yeah. And, one of the most base tweets you sent, I think it was right after taking over the account, was being extremely clear that, school choice is maybe fine as like a stepping stone, but what we really want is to abolish. That was a little controversial, wasn't it?
Yeah, maybe it was a little controversial, but like as you say, I mean, our platform speaks to it's a radical platform, and we won't rest until we have the absolute separation of education and state. I know that's a big deal for you. That's a big deal for a lot of libertarians. I think that's where society completely goes wrong, is that education is really at the root of everything. If we don't have a well-educated populace and the merits of liberty, how can we expect them to ever be anti-war, anti-Fed, anti-drug war, etc.? We can't until that's fixed. So yeah, we wanted to make clear that, school vouchers and things like the expansion of charter schools might be, a good stopgap, but really the biggest conflict of interest in the world is having the state have a monopoly on education. We wouldn't accept this if it was Walmart doing the same. This is one point Tom Woods brings up all the time. Kids in school aren't forced to, look at 9 pictures of the former Walmart CEOs, say a pledge to them, be taught about all of their, personal, political doctrines, things like that. But that's what school is just for the state. So It's a big deal. I'm glad you've made that a big focus of your campaign. It's a hugely important issue, especially with all the wokeism and CRT creeping into the mainstream.
No, definitely. And that's what I'm just going to keep on hammering on, because I think it's also the issue, quite frankly, that's most important to voters. I think that there still seem to be Republicans who believe that the public education system can be fixed if only they're put in charge of it. But I really have misgivings because, I've seen people like, and I'll pick on Chris Rufo, and I do this because I really respect Christopher Rufo. And I know that I think that he knows that. But one of the things I've really had a problem with that he's talked about lately is he wants to replace the curriculum that's going on in schools now with a more conservative leaning curriculum. And I'm like, no, dude. No. That is not the point of what we're talking about. This is not just like the person who's in charge gets to make the rules. That's entirely antithetical to the whole thing. We have a disagreement there, but I think that ultimately, like, there's no way that the public, I'm an organizational psychologist. I know how to assess systems and how to fix systems when they're broken, and it's not a fixable thing. And I think for me, like, trying to advance messaging around really helping people to understand that it is not a fixable system because it is a staffing problem. We don't have the teachers to be able to put into schools to be able to get all the non-woke teachers out because of how the teacher education program works. And there are many other problems too, but that's probably one of the most fundamental ones for me is like, you get all the woke teachers out of school, who do you replace them with? And what happens then? And it just doesn't work. But I also think there's a balance. And I think one of the things that I struggle with some libertarians in helping them to understand is that you can't just, the public schools are going to die when the public wants the public schools to die. And I feel like what I've heard in response to my campaign has been people speaking up saying, well, why don't you just argue for a bill to decouple like education and government? I'm like, because the public isn't going to support that right now because they don't understand why we need to decouple education from government. What are some of your, I don't know if you have thoughts about that at all. That was me rambling,
Yeah,
really.
here's my I'll try to make this concise. I think all of
Yeah.
those, subjects are really important, and you have a much better background in education to speak to this than myself. But what I will say is I stumble at some of the views that voucher systems are innately good, and here's why. Some of them have been very good. I know Corey DeAngelis does great work with this. He said that Arizona's most recent one is one of the best. But what I've seen from some voucher programs that I've looked into is they don't succeed really in doing anything more than co-opting private schools and turning them into kind of quasi-government schools. And when I say that, I mean that right now you ostensibly have some private schools that aren't really subject to much government regulation. But what some of the voucher programs have done is force those schools, if they want to accept children that have the vouchers, to kind of adopt additional regulations that they otherwise wouldn't have had. So that's a big problem too. I wish that, short of, ending the public school system, which I think is important and I'll always speak to, is favoring kind of like a tax credit system instead, because that seems ultimately way more libertarian to me than vouchers where, voucher accepting private schools would have to be subject to more restrictions. Does that make sense? Or do you have any thoughts on that too?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that makes total sense. I think how I view school choice is I view it as kind of a necessary stepping stone to do a couple things. Because I think, I think we're kind of tackling the issue from like two different angles, and
Mm,
I think that that's important to do because we need to attack it from as many angles as we can. I think where I tend to think about in terms of creating social change and creating your basic like change management process of getting your normal person who's busy, who has a job, who maybe doesn't, spend all their days reading the 12 economics books I was assigned to when I joined the Libertarian Party that I still haven't read yet, by the way. Like you have to get them comfortable with an idea, right? And I think that the way I view it is a school choice gets people comfortable with the idea of shopping around, of looking at other options, of not just taking what's given to them, and instead says, okay, well, between these two schools, how do I really evaluate which one is better? And making the decision sometimes like, oh, well, I can opt out of the school and go over here. That's really great. And I think that once we get people to kind of make that base decision, that kind of opens them up to saying, well, if I can do that, why can't I do this instead? Or what other possibilities are there that I didn't even consider? Because I just always thought I was just going to put my kid in public school and I didn't even question the system at all. And I think that that's what the value that school choice gives us is it gets people thinking about schools in a new way. What do you think
Totally. And
about
I
that?
think that might be the one silver lining of the COVID regime is shutting down all these schools have forced parents to think about this much more than they ever otherwise would have. And I
Hmm.
think some even got more angry when schools didn't open up. So, I mean, there are some positive things on our side to get people thinking about it. And I agree. I think generally politics is a downstream of where the culture is at and winning the ideological kind of battles. So,
Definitely, definitely. Well, I won't bore everyone with the school choice stuff anymore, or the Department of Education stuff, though I could probably go on about this all day. But I'm really glad that you guys are tackling the issue on the Twitter account and making sure that the known and unapologetic libertarian position is we want to decouple schools from the government, and that's what it is, and we are not going to stop until the Department of Education is gone, and then we can figure out a plan for what we're gonna do. I,
absolutely.
another issue that, of course, is very important to me is woke culture, and of course, that overlaps with the schools. But you guys have been addressing that as well on the Twitter account.
We've done at least two explicitly anti woke tweets that speak to, libertarianism is about individuality, right? And individual rights. And wokeism and CRT often are forms of collectivism that basically view people in terms of groups. And that's not something that was ever part of anything libertarian. And we wanted to make that clear. I mean, most regular people are just so sick of this nonsense. They don't want to hear about class-based oppression. They want to talk about individual rights and view their conception of the world in that way. I just think it's been such a mistake not to speak out against that, and I don't think a lot of Republicans are willing to speak out against it because they are cowardly. So
Well, you know what I've come to figure out, and this didn't dawn on me until the Republicans were completely out of power, and you get to see. I think you learn a lot about someone when they're like basically an opposition force rather than they have any kind of like what the NBA textbooks called like legitimate power that they had when Trump was in the White House, and I think that you get to know what they really value and what they really mean. And a lot of Republicans were speaking out against wokeism when Trump was still in office. And then what I noticed with it is that they started to kind of transition after that to basically. You know what it almost seems like? It seems like they know they're going to go back into power at some point, whether that be 2022 or 2024 or what have you. And they're basically saying, well, we do want to be able to control things when we're in power. We want to be able to push all the buttons that the Democrats can push. And so it's like, were they ever really against wokeism? I'm not sure. What do you think?
it's hard for me to tell because I don't I don't cross paths in like conservative political circles much, but that is something that seems to unite a lot of the right. But yeah, I think a lot of it is, as you say, that I think a lot of portions of kind of the populist right has kind of developed their own kind of ethos around their own kind of woke ethos. And what I mean by that is they'll say stuff like, you know, be very antagonistic toward like China and saber rattling toward China and big time protectionists. Like it almost has kind of some of the same qualities of wokeism that have destructive tendencies in their own right too. So I think a lot of it is kind of choreographed by the mainstream media to kind of just channel wokeism in different directions, whether it's left or right. But the central issue is libertarianism is about individuality. And, we made clear we're against all forms of race essentialism, whether it be left or right flavors. They're all bunk as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. And that's another thing I really love about and I talk about like I feel like I'm talking about the libertarians like I'm not a part of it, but how I kind of like to look at the political spectrum is I have basically like here's my setup and you can tell me about how you do this and monitor kind of the cultural zeitgeist because you have to know what's going on if you're running the Twitter account, right? You have to know where to go, you have to know who to reply to. And I find it to be fascinating. I have like one screen where I have all of my Republican and conservative people. I have another screen where I have all my lefty people and I have another screen where I have all my libertarian people. And it really is like looking into three different universes. And I find it to be fascinating to see what is the right talking about on any given day? How do the libertarians react? What's the left doing? Because it is just completely different cultures. Do you have something like that?
Oh, I have something like that. So what we do, and this is a good strategy for any libertarian Twitter managers, set notifications on all the worst people in the world. So
So who would that be?
So we have notifications set on Trump, AOC, Bernie Sanders, Mitch McConnell. We have some people like Trey Gowdy. We have some set on various people from both the left and the right that have active accounts. Like, that's the criteria I use. If they have a lot of followers, put a lot of content out, we actually want to follow them. And it's not because we admire them, or notifications, because we obviously don't admire them, but we do want to see what they're saying, not only so that we can jump in and reply tweets that slam them, but also kind of, conceptualize what the left and right are thinking about these issues. This is something that kind of we did in LPTN and is still being done there. That's what the Twitter manager that manages that account does now too. And it's helped us immensely, not only to frame ourselves with what's hot in the news, but also jump into the replies. We also put notifications on people like Snowden and some other people that we really want to see what they're saying and reply to. But I have, my favorite accounts that I follow. Glenn Greenwald's one of my favorite.
He does a great job.
Yeah, Jimmy Dore. I mean, I love Zuby. I love, all sorts of others that aren't terrible people too. So I try to get a cross section as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, how have the numbers been and the metrics? Let's talk about the brass tacks, because I get heard that we were going to lose everyone that had ever followed the Libertarian Party once the Mises Caucus took over. Has that happened?
Hasn't happened, and I'll present kind of a concise report at our LNC meeting this weekend in Alexandria, actually. But we've broken every metric, and to my knowledge, I think we've set every record. I went back and I looked at previous analytics, and we don't have records that go back to like 2009, but followers, we've almost gotten 10% more followers in just 2 months. Our first 28-day summaries has our followers up over 20,000 people. Mentions were up 238%. Profile visits up more than triple. Tweet impressions were up almost by 5 times, and tweets themselves up by about 350%. So every metric, did really well. I'm not saying that we can't improve. We always have room to improve. I won't quit until we have a free country and a free society in the libertarian way. But I think that we're making good headway. Not everyone has left. The account is growing by leaps and bounds, and we plan to continue to grow it.
Awesome. And what have been some of the top performing tweets?
Yeah, actually, I have that in front of me. So I'll read one. One was slamming Republicans for not being pro-life when it came to wars, the death penalty, and enforcement of the state's murderous drug war. And also that Democrats...
I bet Republicans love that.
Yeah. Democrats aren't pro-choice when it comes to health, freedom, education, and guns, as we learn. And in contrast, individual liberty is always our North Star. That's our biggest performing tweet. It had over 1 million impressions.
Wow.
One that I was really proud of that we wrote was talking about kind of our gun control agenda. And I intended to start it with stuff that was, more palatable to more radical. So we started with abolish the ATF, repeal various firearms legislation, repeal all red flag laws. And then by the end, it says ridicule gun grabbing politicians, encourage gun printing by individuals, and decriminalize automatic weapons. And you will not see conservatives write this.
No.
So I'm proud of that one. We've also have a few very well performing national divorce tweets that got, some controversy, but also a lot of praise and a lot of retweets too. So those are some of our best. Our first day was huge. We had some tweets saying that, the Libertarian Party is now a home for Ron Paul supporters.
Oh, I remember that one.
So, I mean, stuff like that, you'd be surprised how some of them have performed, but a lot of them deal with, some of our replies have been much more than our regular tweets.
I mean, I think, again, like, to come back to the beginning of this, like, you guys are it is such a tight rope to walk. And I wasn't sure what to expect when the switch finally got flipped, as it were. But like, I just really think you guys have been doing a really great job of being like edgy and, like, as you said, irreverent and like fun. And you're replying to people, and you're not just replying to the biggest accounts. You're replying to like normal people and as well, and doing that sort of thing. And has it felt good, kind of managing the account and seeing the response that you're getting?
I think it's the funnest thing in the world. I love this. It's my favorite thing that I've ever done for the sake of the party, to be honest. I love interacting with libertarians across the globe, even if they're not in the party. Dan Smots, we interact with him. We love to give the Free State Project some love. That was one thing I really wanted to do when I first, knew that I was going to be helping, is give some love to the Free State. You guys are killing it. And the previous administrations didn't seem to care. And it's just, who has carved out a more libertarian society than, those acres in New Hampshire, a few others. So I wanted to bring that to highlight. Yeah, it's been so fun. I love doing it. I love, bringing the libertarian message where it wouldn't be otherwise, and at least getting people to raise their eyebrows. And yeah, maybe some of it's edgy, but it really isn't edgy for edginess sake. It's edgy in a way that we want to be thought provoking and get people drawn to individual rights and liberty.
No, absolutely. So what does someone need to do to get retweeted by the Libertarian National Party?
Oh, well, it's basically kind of an editorial decision, kind of the guidance I've been given by our chair. And me and the chair basically see eye to eye on this, is that we're retweeting affiliates/candidates twice to 3 times a day. So what I'll do is I'll just peruse Twitter and find, clever points that are being raised by our affiliates. Some of my favorite accounts are New Hampshire Twitter, Libertarian Party Colorado, Libertarian Party Kentucky, Tennessee, Connecticut. There's lots of good ones. And also I have kind of a list of candidates that I look through every day and see, if they posted anything spicy that day, especially when it comes to something in the news, we want to retweet them. There's not much science in it. I've done my best to try to retweet candidates from across the country. But basically it's editorial discretion. Dave does some as well. So there's not really a hidden formula, but if it's a candidate, we want to promote them.
How do you want kind of someone who might have a bad taste in their mouth because the Libertarian Party was woke before this, and they're like, oh, can't do the Libertarian Black Lives Matter tweets. You're kind of like rebranding the party, to be honest. And I quite frankly hate that rebranding gets done on Twitter, because I think Twitter is ridiculous. But it is in a very real way in the political world. It is one of the centers of the political world, and more people take it seriously. And so have you thought about how you want the Libertarian Party to be perceived by kind of outsiders? What is the brand?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, we have kind of a communications committee right now that spans across the different platforms, and we share ideas like this all the time. But we want to be perceived as the ones that, and I always say this, and I've repeated it ad nauseum, I've already probably said it here today, is that we want to venture into controversial territory and speak the truth. We want to show people that the state is not just misguided, they are evil and ruining your lives. And here's why. And we provide the solutions. It's the most logical and morally consistent philosophy that's ever been available to people. And we just want people to know we're out there. And if people are skeptical, that's fine. Follow the account for a while, give us a try. But here's what I would tell those people that are skeptical. Don't necessarily feel like you need to buy into everything. Just retweet and support what you agree on. Because it happens to be that almost everyone would agree on some portion of libertarianism, whether it's the drug war, whether it's guns, whether it's the Fed and money, or Bitcoin, or any other issue you want to talk about that's interrelated with the LP. So, give us a chance, even if it's only on a few single issues.
I mean, I really agree with that. And I think, I am very committed that I think that more people that, again, from the MAGA movement, and also from red pilled former lefties, or people who are just waking up to how evil everything it is. I think the only home that makes sense for people like that is the Libertarian Party, because you really can have whatever values you want to have as a libertarian. I mean, there's some core stuff like anti-war and anti-Fed and stuff, and the non-aggression principle and stuff like that. But I think those are generally pretty easy for most people to get behind that come from those areas. Those are kind of no-brainers. But I feel for me, I think that both the major political parties are evil. And I think that, people feel the need to go into one of them without understanding that pretty much everyone can fit into the Libertarian Party. It's just really about, to get it at its most, base thing is don't tell other people what to do. Don't try to run other people's lives. You do whatever you want. Let them be. And if you guys have overlapping values, then, you can find ways to work together. And if you don't, then go into your own separate communities and leave each other alone. Did I sum that up pretty correctly?
Oh, totally. I think that's one of the best ways to articulate it. Maybe the elevator speech I would give is, You can do whatever you want in the world as long as it doesn't infringe on someone else's rights. You can have whatever preferences you want as long as that doesn't cross that boundary. And I think, too much of LP past has been consumed by this absurd idiom that libertarianism is social conservative, socially conservative or economically conservative and socially liberal. And I think that was the wrong messaging always and forever. It doesn't really articulate what we're about, and it's not even accurate half the time. So yeah, I would articulate it more similarly to what you do. I always tell people 3 basic ideas in libertarianism is self-ownership, property rights, and non-aggression. And from there you can branch out to almost every kind of facet of libertarianism.
Yeah, I mean, I have friends, and I'm always trying to like funnel everyone into the party. I'm like, you don't understand, like this is actually the place you need to be. But I have people that are like, well, Carlin, don't the libertarians just want to smoke a lot of weed, and that's basically all they care about? And I really don't like weed, and I don't think people should smoke weed, and I don't think it's good. And I'm like, guess what? You don't have to smoke weed. You really don't have to. It's okay. No one's going to judge you if you don't make the choice.
It's part of everyone's initiation when they sign the pledge, though. So, no.
Okay. We don't tell them about the hazing ritual when we're live on the internet. We do that later.
Right. But backstage after this, yeah.
Yeah. but I almost think like, and maybe this is kind of like a pitch to you in some ways. Like what I've been trying to do with people in my community, and like my community is like, a lot of people, about 50% of my viewers are consider themselves to be politically homeless or independent. Probably about 25% of them now, and that's gone up significantly in the last year, are libertarian, and about 25% of them are conservative, and maybe like a small little fringe of hate watchers that are Democrats in there every once in a while. That's generally the demographic that I've seen. And I'm really trying to convince them that I guess what I would love to see is I don't know the best way, because I am still very baby libertarian, to teach newbies about this stuff. So I'm kind of like fumbling through it, trying to do the best I can to show people at least the experience I've had in the Libertarian Party and why I think it's so much better. But I wonder if there are more structured ways to like teach people about the values. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, what I've learned, and I've been associated with the Libertarian Party and libertarianism in general since 2004. There was an interregnum where I left the party for a while and came back. But what I can tell you is that from my journeys and my meeting all sorts of libertarianism, or libertarians, is that different things work for different people. Like for me, I have a story in learning about it that very few people had. I just randomly stumbled upon one of Murray Rothbard's books randomly during a college research project. It was The History of Money and Banking in the United States. And that's not how most people discover it. Some people need to be, talked to about it just in a casual setting. The worst thing you can do is just, be very abrasive at first and not be open-minded in hearing people's questions, because when you're talking one-on-one, it won't be the same as, a Twitter conversations that's obviously adversarial. Be open-minded, answer people's questions, recommend to them Bastiat's The Law and Anatomy of the State by Murray Rothbard, Economics in One Lesson by Hazlitt. Those are all 3 like pretty concise tracks that deal with it very well. That's why I kind of recommend those. But a lot of it too is, talking to local people about their local issues and how, decentralization can benefit them. You don't even have to call it libertarianism. You can, call it setting yourself free and applying that to almost every issue. Even like garbage collection in some communities is like controlled by strict monopolies. Well, talking about how that could be improved is libertarian. So you don't necessarily have to get people to buy in all the way right away, and not everything works for every person. I know people that got in because they randomly saw Ron Paul on television. That's a lot of us probably in the movement right now. So a lot of people learn different ways.
No, definitely. And I think I like that you bring up the decentralization piece too, because I have like a volunteer like group called the Unwoke Army, and I basically like what I've been trying to do is take this like decentralized idea that I learned kind of being in New Hampshire and seeing like the Free State Project and the LPNH and all the different groups here kind of working together in these loose coalitions and all of this stuff. And it's like that to me made the most sense of any strategy I'd seen in terms of organizing, in terms of its effectiveness, because if you cut off the head of one snake, you still have 10, and there like can be more that grow out of that one head that's cut off, and it becomes like a self-sustaining thing. And so what I'm trying to do right now is take that and apply it to grassroots activism against like the woke agenda, particularly with a focus on schools and turning people against the schools. And what I found, because I'm basically getting volunteers from my community to come in, and we do it. It's kind of like a club. Like we watch messed up videos about critical race theory, and then we go and investigate the schools.
I've
And we
seen
do like
your special before on those. They're great.
yeah, and like and this is actually how, so when I exposed the grooming in the Burlington school district, that was a whole decentralized thing where like I had an army of volunteers kind of like working on this all weekend to expose these people. And I'm trying to build this thing up to where there are a whole bunch of people all doing kind of like their own things, but we're all coordinating with each other and talking to each other and helping and supporting. One of the things that I found though is that this decentralized model is really confusing to people when they haven't been in it before. So now I'm having to go back and put more structure around it and try to explain it in a way that people understand it. Does any of that like make sense? Do you have any feedback on what I just said?
Yeah, totally. I mean, from our youth, we're taught in government schools that centralization is always a good thing on almost everything. So it is like deconstructing, an entire person's, upbringing in some ways to get them on board with some of this stuff. So I can see where the challenges exist. What I would do is kind of gauge where they stand on various issues and show how decentralization can benefit them in the issue they care about. So if it's gun fanatic, talk about how 3D printing guns and nullifying federal firearms legislation will help them. If they hate guns and maybe their issue is something like decriminalization, talk about how decentralization can nullify the immoral and unconstitutional drug war. So yeah, it's deconstructing reality in so many ways. I went through public school, so I went through this. It was an epiphany for me. I was a total neocon, believe it or not, embarrassingly enough. So, we all have to deconstruct some of our preconceived notions, and getting people to that point is sometimes baby steps, but it often starts with what they care about.
No, I mean that's very true, and I sympathize too with how confusing it is. I remember like when I first went to PorkFest in 2021, I had no idea what was going on. I didn't understand the model that Dennis was using with PorkFest, but then going in and I think experiencing it, and like just being involved in it firsthand, you have to learn it really quickly, and then you start to see how it works, and you start to see the benefits of it. You're like, oh, I can do whatever I want. This is great. And like once you get it's like you stop asking for permission in order to be able to do things, and you stop kind of looking like you can look for people to build like, I hate to use this word, allyships with, and like coordinate on stuff where it makes sense for both of you. But I actually think it's an incredibly empowering model that opens up so many doors that wouldn't be otherwise opened.
Absolutely. And shout out to Dennis. I love that guy. He is one of the hardest working activists I've ever met. He's great. Check out PorkFest, guys, if you're watching this next year. I'm going to try to be there next year.
Oh, you have to come. It's going to be the big 20th anniversary. So it's going to be really big. Carla's talking about getting like a big screen and all this stuff. She wants to bring back all the speakers that have ever spoken at PorkFest. So you have to come.
Yeah. Gosh, Carla, what's her last name again? She's involved in the Free State Project.
Yeah. Carly Garrick.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
I've heard her on Tom Woods. That was an excellent episode, by the way.
Yeah. Carla is amazing. I mean, Dennis is phenomenal. Did you know Dennis just won he won an award the other night, Liberty Activist of the Year, from the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance. So shout out Dennis.
I actually responded on the national account about that, giving him props. So yeah, shout out Dennis.
Man, there's so many amazing activists in the liberty world. Who are some of your favorite activists?
Oh man, for me, activists, Tom Woods and Dave Smith are my absolute favorites. I love Michael Malice. Back in the day when I first got into libertarianism, it was Murray Rothbard, Robert Higgs, some of the classical liberal theorists like John Locke and Algernon Sidney and people like that got me really into it. But, Walter E. Williams, there's so many great people that are in the movement. I know that I'm slighting some of them right now, but there's some great activists that are candidates. You and Jeremy and Shane Hazel, and there's all sorts of great activists.
I love that Shane's like unapologetic. I'm going to spoil your election.
he's one of our favorite candidates to retweet. He does great Twitter messaging, and his reach is fantastic. So go Shane. He's in my region too. I get to represent Shane, so I'm pumped about that.
Well, how are things generally going on the LNC since you guys took over? You know, you have your first in-person meeting since you took over. How are things going for you?
Yeah, so we technically had an in-person meeting in Reno, and our
Ah,
first
yes.
actual in-person meeting is this weekend in Alexandria. It's going great. What I'll say is that we are not a hive mind. We've actually disagreed on quite a few things, as you'll see on the business list, but we have a very professional working relationship so far. Everyone trusts everyone for the most part, and most of us came in on the same slate, so some of that's natural. But even where there's disagreement, we don't try to coup affiliates like they tried in your state because of
Yeah.
dissension or things like that. We work together well, and we're just trying to do our best to spread liberty any way we can. It's been fun to really do outreach so far in terms of the Bitcoin community. We had that fundraiser, didn't
Oh,
raise
that
the
was great.
it was great. It didn't raise the target funds, but I love building bridges with that community because that's one of the things that has been so lost from the party. And that is one of the most important relationships we can build. We've also done a lot in terms of ballot access, fundraising. More than 600 new members signed up in our first month since the Reno reset. And the finances look really good too. Todd just put out
Yeah.
his treasurer's report. So things are going really well, and I look forward to see what this weekend brings. There's going to be a lot of discussion there, and we've also sorted out some things like recognizing the purged Delaware affiliate. The people that were purged from their state party for daring to call for a special convention. So we've tried to right some wrongs, push liberty in a better direction, and work on the nuts and bolts. Campaign season is big. We want to get behind the candidates that we have right now, and there's some real opportunities across the country. I'm really looking forward to election night, seeing like what you and Jeremy do up there.
Well, did you hear about the polling? So,
I don't
so
think so.
okay, so check this out. Check this out. The Democrat running for governor polled on my name. And apparently I am polling currently at 8%.
That's
So I don't know.
fantastic.
I was like honestly like a little blown away by that, but I was also very exciting. And so I also have to thank you guys because you guys gave like the LNC gave Jeremy and I $5,000 to finish up petitioning to get ballot access, and we finished, and we're getting everything certified right now, but it does look like we will have ballot access. So that was really great. So we definitely appreciate the support there.
Oh, totally. I mean, it's an obvious place where there's great candidates and just probably the best libertarian culture. And I'm betraying my own state. Tennessee has a great libertarian culture, but the free state, it's hard to argue. And I can see why Dennis calls the remaining 49 states the authoritarian 49. It always cracks me up. But you guys have your own culture going, and there's no one that's living more free than you guys up there. So
It really is amazing. But I'm also really glad to see the LNC is working well together because one of the big concerns I had, and again I think this is probably coming from like my organizational psychology background, or maybe just because I got thrown into the fire because like literally a month after I joined the Libertarian Party, the New Hampshire coup happened. And so
right.
it was like from that moment on up until like the national convention, it was war. It was a constant war every single day.
Welcome to the party, Carlin.
Well, I mean, it was a blessing in some respects because honestly, I learned so much because it's like people outside the party, like I don't think they understand. So I'm mostly speaking to the audience right now. Like when that happened, you were watching all the LNC meetings. You're watching Karen Ann Harlow's talk about the intricacies of Robert's Rules of Order. You're learning all the players, and you're learning like what libertarians do. It's kind of like a snaky game of chess where they go through and nitpick all the bylaws and find loopholes and things, and then you have these other teams that are trying to figure out what loopholes they're going to find so they can put in countermeasures in place. It is a constant game of chess, and it was stressful for a lot of people, so I don't want to make light of it, but it was also fascinating. But it was also like there was just one war after another. There was New Hampshire, and then there was Delaware, and then there was Massachusetts, and then there was something going on in Arizona, and something going on in New Mexico, and then the Pennsylvania thing, which was like kind of controversial in terms of like just how the delegates got elected and all this stuff. And it was like one of the all of this is to say, like, one of the things I was really worried about when the national convention was finally over and everything was set and we won, was I was really worried that people were going to be so used to fighting that they wouldn't stop
Mm.
fighting, that they would just constantly be looking for that fight. And it was almost like I would read the LNC like public business list every day, just like it almost felt like you're waiting for a pin drop, like when's it going to happen? When's it going to happen? And it just hasn't yet. And I think that that's really great.
Yeah, and there's a lot of the time ahead of us in 2 years. It's hard to know what the future brings, but I do have faith that this group is going to work together well. Trial by fire, so welcome to the party. I'm glad you stuck around, Carlin, because a lot of people would have probably turned their head and walked. But it's unfortunate that a lot of like the party business sometimes comes down to amending the bylaw. And Dave Smith mocks this a lot by saying, he'd rather do anything else than have an amendment to the amendment of a bylaw. And a lot of that, hopefully will go away. I mean, that's always going to be part of the national conventions, but really outwardly, now we have a chance to bring, the most proud radical form of libertarianism that we've always wanted to bring. This has been a 4 or 5 year long fight for a lot of us. I came back into the party around mid 2010s, and the organizers in the Mises Caucus have worked really hard to put together kind of an agenda on what we want to do. And I was elected by a lot of Mises Caucus people. I have to represent people that aren't Mises Caucus. Fair enough. There's some good natured criticism of what we're doing, and there's some bad natured criticism of what we're doing. I just have to do the thing I think's right and in the best representation of our region and move forward. So we do have opportunities.
No, definitely. And there are people out there, and I'm gonna take a moment. I'm gonna take a point of personal privilege, Dave, because there are a lot of people out there that they think that I joined the Libertarian Party as some sort of grift, and predictions have been made that I'm going to bolt over to the Green Party at any moment. And I really don't think that those people understand the absolute bonding of the last year of hellfire that has been not only, definitely in the LPNH and the New Hampshire Mises Caucus, but I think nationally for the Mises Caucus just in general. And one of the things I am just like, I am so impressed by Michael Heiss. I went to some of those organizing meetings when we were getting ready for the Pennsylvania convention and then for the national convention. And so I saw his level of leadership, and he was doing so much more behind the scenes than I think I even have any reference for at all. And it's just like, I was so proud of him. And I was so proud of every Mises Caucus person that kind of stepped up, and everyone was so on point, and everyone was just doing the things they needed to do. And it was like, again, and this is probably the organizational psychologist in me, but I'm so used to dysfunctional organizations and just seeing people fight each other, that to see this community where people were like legitimately working together and rather selflessly in so many respects. Like people spent thousands of dollars to go to the national convention just to be able to take over the party and to win together. And it's such an incredible thing. And I understand that you guys have to represent interests outside of the Mises Caucus, and I think that that's fair and appropriate, because but one of the things I really love about the Mises Caucus is I think they are very principled people, that if you have valid arguments, they'll listen. It's just they're not going to do any of this underhanded snaky nonsense where they're trying to make the party like the woke progressive left. It really is about appealing to people who want libertarian principles.
Yeah,
Am I right about that?
Oh, totally. People would actually be pretty surprised about like how much internal disagreement there is in terms of strategy and priorities, even in the caucus, by the way. But yeah, Heiss is as indispensable as Dan Smots. That guy's my brother. We haven't always agreed on everything. We didn't even agree on who should be the vice chair, but it's like whatever. He's an amazing organizer. And one of the things that he brings up that I always come back to is how infectious the Mises Caucus culture has become. And you didn't just see it this year. You saw it, last year at the Mises Bash in Pennsylvania. You saw it at this year's Pennsylvania convention as well, where those Mises get-togethers after the convention and stuff, it's just full of hugs and fist bumps and, being super on fire, excited for liberty in ways that I haven't seen since the Ron Paul Revolution, because that's what we're doing. This is the new Ron Paul Revolution. And I want that kind of cultural bond to spill over into the rest of the party. And I think we got that started. I want that to be how the whole party operates, because you can't deny, even the biggest kind of anti-Mises person cannot deny how infectious and how much solidarity there is in that culture.
It's so true. And I think one of my favorite photos from the national convention was when Ron Paul was speaking in that room where you couldn't hear anything for most of it. But when Ron Paul was speaking, there's an amazing photo from the side where you just see like, just hundreds of people just surrounding him and standing, and just like everyone is just so quiet listening to what he has to say. And I thought it was like, that is such a wonderful moment. Like Ron Paul, I mean, I don't really talk about this that much, but like I remember the Ron Paul campaign in college. Like that was something that got my attention. It didn't pull me into the Libertarian Party, but I definitely was paying attention to it. And, I agreed with a lot of the ideas. I just wasn't thinking politically at that time. So that didn't do it for me. But like, it was such a wonderful moment. It's almost like a passing of the torch. Like you guys did me proud. And it was very moving for me to be there to see that.
Oh, totally. And Smots' video for that they premiered, just
So good.
it put me on fire, because when they both said, an idea whose time has come cannot be stopped by any army or any government in unison, it was powerful. That was a great video. Passing of the torch for sure. You had all the best activists and best spokesmen for our ideology there. That was one of probably the best Liberty event I've ever been to by far. And it was incredible to be a part of it, especially kind of to win a representative spot in kind of a movement that's venturing in that kind of libertarian direction.
Yeah, well, I mean, and let's talk about that. Like, how did that feel? I mean, you're a regional rep. Did that feel good to get elected to that position?
Very few things have felt better than that in my whole life. I don't take it lightly. I did not expect to win. I didn't know for sure that I would win. There's another great candidate that ran against him, Omar Requero. Props to you, sir. We ran a very respectable campaign against each other. Representing Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, Georgia, and Tennessee is not an easy job. There's a lot of dynamics there. It's a big, strong region in our party. But yeah, I feel very much gratitude for it. And I'm going to try to do my best not to betray the interests of my constituents. So absolutely, I look forward to representing them.
Fun fact, do you know what I learned at PorkFest? Pat Ford is the most based libertarian in the entire party. Just fun fact. Guy. He is amazing. I don't know why I just thought of that, but like, your regional rep comrade from my region is like, he is the most based mother effer in the Libertarian.
You think so?
I really
I'll tell him you think that. I'll see him this weekend, but that's awesome. I love Pat. He's a great guy. He's been in the party a long time and a definite radical. So that's cool.
No, he and I had a great talk at PorkFest, and I liked Pat before. I thought Pat was fine. I thought he was always a very balanced guy. I thought he did a really good job. But he was like and Smots can vouch for this too, because Smots was filming the conversation that we had, and he and I were just looking it back. We were like, what is going on? Like Pat Ford is based. So
well, that's great. Ford is we've become more close, in the run up to Reno. I don't know him too well, but I can't wait to get to know him more. But yeah, he represents a powerful and great region up there too.
Definitely. Well, as we wrap up, Dave, is there anything else that we should have touched on that we have not touched on already?
Not really. I was just very happy to be invited. I'll just say that look out for my book, Thomas Paine, A Lifetime of Radicalism. It comes out in Thanksgiving this year. I'll be posting more information on my Facebook about it and on my Twitter. My private Twitter is dbenner83. I can't wait to release that to the public. It's been a project I worked for more than 4.5 years on. And you can get autographed copies from me. That's just side from the LP, but something that I'm proud of too.
Awesome. Well, definitely come back on the show when your book comes out, and we can help sell some copies and talk about it, and talk about why you wrote it and stuff like that. I'd love to hear more.
Well, I would love to be back, and thanks for having me. I'm really glad that you took notice of the Twitter account, and thanks to everyone who's supported the new direction of the messaging. So thanks, Carlin.
Awesome. Well, I'm gonna pull you off screen. I'm gonna chill a little bit, and then we'll debrief after. Okay. Cool.
Rock on.
All right, guys. If you enjoyed this chat with Dave, I definitely would like to encourage you to pick up a copy or pre-order his book if it's available. I know I put the link in the description below, but Dave is so smart. Like, I mean, we haven't even begun to touch on how smart Dave Benner is. So we're going to bring him back in the future and get some more information about that. But just want to remind you guys that if you would like to support the work I'm doing, please make sure you become a member of my locals. Again, that's kb.locals.com/support. I can't do these streams without help and support because YouTube doesn't pay the bills, but luckily luckily, my locals members do a great job of supplementing when they watch the content regularly, enjoy the guests I have. I'm trying to bring on, I'm starting a new series. You may have noticed it on my YouTube channel. It's called Libertarian Matters, where I am going to be bringing on libertarian guests, mostly because I like talking about this stuff, and I hope people like it too. So I've got a lot of interesting guests that I'm going to be lining up. I'll announce more when we have some firm dates on that. But just as a reminder, please make sure you join me back for stream number 3 today at 9:30 p.m. tonight. Nothing remotely controversial is live with Joshua. And so we're going to be doing our usual thing where we'll take your questions. Joshua will work his psychic powers to kind of deliver us some answers. And so that's always a really fun show. Even if you don't believe in psychics, that's okay. You can still come and have fun because we just have a good old time with it. It's a very lighthearted way to look at the news. And then, of course, tomorrow I'm on with Jennifer. Jennifer is actually a wonderful member of my locals community, but we're going to talk about what it's like to grow up in a Christian cult as part of my new Disenrage series, where I'm trying to take a look at different perspectives, different sort of, different ways of living life and different life experiences that people have. I really want to do bigger picture perspective stuff because I think that we have to remind ourselves what we're fighting for and why we're going out of our ways to do this activism and to really stand up for what we believe in. And that's because you should be allowed to, have whatever human experiences you want. And there's so many possibilities out there that I just don't think people really consider. So I want to talk about what it's like for her to have grown up in a cult. And, obviously she's kind of left that now, and how that opens up a world of possibilities. I think it's going to be a fascinating conversation, and that's going to be tomorrow on the channel. All right, guys, that's all I have for today. Please mount that like button on your way out the door, and I will see some of you around 9:30. Take care. We'll see you soon.